In this lecture, we are going to discuss about Centre-Periphery as given by Andre Frank. So he has done an analysis of underdeveloped nations of Latin America and used the dependency theory. Now, what is dependency theory? There is a separate lecture about it, but I'll give you a rough idea where one country or many countries which are not as developed as the richer or developed countries, they become dependent on it. Okay, so what happens exactly is the rich countries or the developed countries, they exploit the labor and resources in the other countries. They are also known as the third world countries. So what happens when they exploit the labor and resources, they are getting something manufactured, and as a result they keep getting rich at the expense of what? At the expense of developing world, because they keep getting exploited. Now the dependency theory, all the propagators of this theory, they were against the modernization theories because they said that modernization theories are extracted from historical experiences. Okay, so if we go in history, if we go back in time, we can see that there were so many countries that were colonialized, okay, and the developed countries, they were the rulers. So the experiences of the developed countries and the developing countries which were exploited and which were ruled over, they are very contrasting, okay, and they cannot be compared. So when the situations of the developed and underdeveloped and also the developing countries are very different, so therefore there is no comparison and the theories based on the same, that is the modernization theories, are therefore questioned. He also said that development is a myth which obscures the reality of exploitation. He said that there are so many countries which say that we are getting developed, but it is nothing but it is overshadowing what? The exploitation. We are trying to hide the reality, that is exploitation, and naming it as development. So how is this exploitation done? It is done through unequal trade and exchange. What happens? Third world countries are in a permanent state of socio-economic dependency. On what countries? On the dominant countries. We can also say rich or the capitalist countries. So these countries, the rich and dominant, they can also be known as the core or center, whereas the dependent ones will be called as periphery or satellite. What happens? The most affected people here are again the peasants, like in history as well. We know that the poorest are the most affected and the vulnerable ones, and they remain poor. And the elite or some urban middle class, they develop in a situation of uneven development because they are getting things manufactured and they are selling it to the developing countries or underdeveloped countries. But who can actually be the beneficiaries of those products are only the elites and urban middle class people. The peasants cannot afford that. They do not have access to it. Therefore, they remain poor. Also, the third world countries cannot follow the Western path. The big countries, the core countries that we are talking about, they have not experienced colonialism. And there were many countries which were advanced before they were colonialized. Only after they got colonialized and they were exploited, and there were so many things that happened during the rule. So a lot of things changed for them. Okay. He also formulated the concept of development of underdevelopment. He said that underdevelopment is not a natural condition but an artifact created by the long history of colonial domination in the third world countries. So because some countries who got rich and who were developed, it is only because of them and the colonial rule, because of the domination and exploitation, that the third world countries, they could not develop and underdevelopment prevailed. So he says it is not a normal condition, it is not natural, but it was created by the history of colonialism. Now let us understand what does Metropolis-Satellite Model means. Okay, this is also given by Andre Frank, and it says that there's a mechanism of how underdevelopment works, right? So the mechanism is the metropolis and satellite relationship, which started in the colonial period itself. We can take the example of India and how Britishers were ruling us during the colonial period. What they did was they implanted new cities in the third world. That means the Britishers, they implanted new cities in India and facilitated transfer of economic surplus to Western countries. So what did they do? Like for example, they started selling cotton because USA stopped the manufacturing during the war. So they manufactured it here, the laborers were exploited here, and the surplus was sent to Western countries. Now, the national cities became satellites of Western metropolis. Okay, so here metropolis means the main city, which is the hub, and satellite is the one which is dependent on it. So even when India was producing, India was doing all the work, but metropolis came out to be Britain and India came out to be as satellite. So it wasn't limited to international level, but also to the regional and local levels of third world countries. The impact was so vast. Now, how was this economic surplus extracted? It was in the form of commodities, like I said, cotton. So the products made from cotton, they started exporting them in the form of profit, in the form of raw material, and a whole chain of constellations of metropolis and satellites, it began forming. So it happened from third world villages to local capital, to regional capital, national capital, and to Western countries. So you see there's such a long chain which started from a village and ended up in different Western countries. So this theory was criticized on various grounds, like in the long term dependency theory, from which this theory is derived. It is based on this, and it does have some Marxist values as well. It is not sufficient to explain why some countries are developed and why others are still developing, because here only one factor is considered, that is colonialism. Although Pete and Hartwig said that this model of metropolis-satellite attempted to place a country into a large global system. Okay, it stressed on the external causes of underdevelopment rather those internal to the peripheral society. Because every developing or underdeveloped country, every underdeveloped society is going through something that is internal in nature. But this theory stressed on the external causes of this underdevelopment and emphasis on economic rather than social or cultural interaction is used. So you can see that there is very less or no interaction based on social and cultural. It is totally based on economic interaction. Let us discuss some questions. Question number 1, it is very important and has been asked in the exam earlier. Who coined the phrase development of underdevelopment? So the answer will be A.G. Frank. Next question is, why is it not right to compare the experiences of the developed Western countries to the third world countries? The answer will be third. Their experiences are not the same because of their history. Because third world countries were colonialized and they were under the rule of conquerors for a really long time. That changed their economy, polity, society, and many other things. Whereas the Western countries, which are developed and which were already rich and powerful, they have very contrasting experiences. Therefore, they are developed and have the kind of power that they have. So I hope you got the lecture. Thank you very much for watching.